Even if you have no knowledge of how film works, it's very easy to know the difference between a film by Quentin Tarantino and Tim Burton. They put their own stylistic flares on their images, dialogue, music, etc. You go into a Quentin Tarantino movie expecting glamorous violence and witty dialogue. You go into a Tim Burton movie expecting a depressing gothic world he has created and set his characters in. They have created their very distinct and memorable movie auteurs, and for some people it is a big selling point for them to go see their films. Simply put, a director's auteur is their visual and sonic style which categorizes their film as distinctively their own. There are plenty of famous directors who have their own unique and artistic flourishes in their movies that make them not only more interesting, but distinctively their own. However, this polarizing director is simply one of the industry's best and most stylish, with distinct and memorable movie auteurs like using visuals to tell a story with minimal dialogue, a unique and beautiful use of colour, methodical and smart use of silence, his explosive use of violence, and always a kick-ass electronic soundtrack to elevate his movies. This is Nicolas Winding Refn. Nicolas Winding Refn has an impressive filmography earlier and later into his career. However, the two films used in this breakdown of his movie auteurs are 2008's Bronson and 2011's Drive. Both films being stylistic masterpieces with box office and critical acclaim, they are also films that helped him break out into the mainstream as a Hollywood director, because of big-name actors such as Tom Hardy and Ryan Gosling appearing in the films. In both films, using his signature use of silence, explosive violence, symbolism, and colour, they are Nicolas Winding Refn classics. But before mentioning any of those, let's talk about music. As far back as his first film Pusher, Nicolas Winding Refn has implied the use of one of his favourite music genres, French house and electronic music. However, they aren't just thrown in without thought, but are purposely placed at emotional high points of the movies to elevate the experience. In Drive, for example, after one of film's most exhilarating and most intense introductions to a movie ever, the scene cuts to black to then open with a slick and very 80s sounding song called Night Call by Kavinsky as the intro credits play, perfectly setting the tone and atmosphere of the movie. In Bronson, for example, after the main character, who is Britain's most violent criminal, is let out of jail, a montage ensues as he makes it as an illegal bare-knuckle boxer while the song Digital Versicolor by Glass Candy plays. The song captures the love and joy he has for violence, as the song overpowers the scene, emphasizing his euphoria. All of this within an awesome sounding electronic beat. The real message here is that, did these songs need to be electronic or in the genre of French house? No. But Nicolas Winding Refn prides himself in the addition of these tracks all over his filmography. This not only makes his movies unique and aesthetically different, but distinctively tied to him. Though in his older films he was accustomed to mostly using handheld for a grittier and more realistic type of feeling, he has grown even more as a director, as in Drive and Bronson he displays an eclectic range of shots and camera angles such as similar panning shots, subtle zooms, and his famous drawn-out one-shot takes. These aren't as impressive as they might sound, however are extremely impactful when paired with one of his other signature movie auteurs, silence.
Are you aware of this?
Anyone can point the camera at one or two people not saying a word with the sole intention to create something deep or profound, but then proceed to create a boring scene of two people not talking. However, this is where the genius of Nicolas Winding Refn shines through, as with this concept, he is able to provoke and create emotion, while creating a memorable and entertaining scene. He has done this same technique in nearly all of his movies, so much it's a joke now that people say there isn't that much dialogue in Nicolas Winding Refn films, even though that's the complete opposite, as his Pusher trilogy alone is almost always praised for its heavy use of relatable and smart writing. For example of one of these silent scenes and how it provokes emotion can firstly be found in Drive. After a relaxing drive between the two main characters, Irene and the driver, Irene puts her son to bed and there is a clear romance brewing between the two. And it is beautifully conveyed through a touching scene of the two awkwardly staring into each other's eyes at the end of the day. The scene is cute and conveys something genuinely human, because it doesn't heavily romanticize the scene, but just lets it play out in one shot. Now, Bronson's example.
What is it you want now?
Music.
Little bit different, isn't it? However, it is clear how Nicolas Winding Refn manipulates silence to either create something beautiful and charming, or scary and intense. It's not only perfectly conveyed in Drive and Bronson, but are famously used in all of his films with the same emotional effects. Without a doubt, something that is distinctively Nicolas Winding Refn is his amazing use of colour. Always paired with beautiful shot composition and lighting, the colours in Nicolas Winding Refn films are always beautiful and surreal. As if what we're watching takes place in a different dimension that ranges from over-the-top and eccentric in films like Only God Forgives and The Neon Demon, to more subtle uses of colour, like in the two examples Drive and Bronson. If it's an eccentric or subtle use of colour, there is always another added signature or tour: symbolism. In the film Bronson, for example, the title character Bronson is a crazy and dangerous person who is passionate about his insanity. Therefore, Bronson is saturated in the colour red to represent his insanity and lust for violence. In Drive, for example, there is a clear contrast between the two lovers and the worlds they live in through colour. The driver's world is blue and cold, and Irene's is orange and warm. However, Nicolas Winding Refn's colours are also his aesthetic. You can tell that a Tim Burton film is dark and dreary, a Nicolas Winding Refn film is lavish, colourful, and dreamlike. The use of symbolism isn't limited to colours, however. For example, the driver wears a jacket with a scorpion in reference to the story of the scorpion and the frog.
Hello? You know the story about the scorpion and the frog?
And in Bronson, after Bronson is let out of prison, there is constant imagery of bars and vertical lines representing jail cells, foreshadowing his eventual return back to prison. Lastly, there is one signature trait to all his movies, and that is violence. Nicolas Winding Refn once said, "Violence is like sex, it's all about the build-up." And that perfectly describes his use of violence in film. Although he has admitted to fetishizing violence in his films, he's never approached violence in his films like Quentin Tarantino does, where he just completely glamorizes it and makes it entertaining. Nicolas Winding Refn's approach is being subversive and realistic, as he doesn't use violence as the payoff, but instead the motives and build-up towards it. In Drive, for example, there is a scene in an elevator where it is clear that the third person with Irene and the driver is there to kill them. However, instead of a close-quarters fight scene, there's this. It's dreamlike and beautiful, as it is the driver not only protecting his loved one, but saying goodbye. But then... It's a jarring cut to something horrible, realistic, gritty, and gory, as the build-up has emphasized not only the violence, but the contrast between the two when they were together and now alone. Bronson again has build-up and tension where you wouldn't think there is any possibility for violence.
Right.
Until you realize that the main character is a psychopath and is completely unpredictable, which is portrayed through Nicolas Winding Refn's unpredictable and subversive use of violence. He always subverts and usually builds up a fight scene in an either dreamlike, otherworldly, or epic sense, to then cut to a realistic and brutal display of violence, emphasizing the contrast. Nicolas Winding Refn has style and finesse, as his movie auteurs of colour, violence, music, and symbolism shine through Drive and Bronson. Though they are completely different films, it is clear to see Refn's influence on both. Symbolically and technically, his films are linked through his auteurs, which keep his films unique and stylish forever. He is a mastermind and refreshing take on cinema and has proven to be a distinct and recognisable author to his works.